Perfect. All right. Well, welcome everyone. I will go ahead and get us started. Since you all are on time, I want to respect your time. So thank you for joining. Very excited to see you all. If you can, please go ahead and put yourselves on camera. This is going to be a very interactive session. I'm going to start with one announcement before we hand things over to Bonnie, and that is we have finally put a pin in our happy hour. Normally it's a summer happy hour, but this year has been kind of insane for a lot of us. So we are looking at October 4th, which is a Wednesday. We're going to be going from 4:30 to 6:30 at 5430, which is the rooftop lounge at Le Meridien Hotel, downtown Denver. So hope you all can join us. Feel free to bring friends, colleagues, everyone is welcome, regardless of gender, encouraged anyone in the industry, please. Let's see, and we have Danielle Cook is on with us today. She is going to be our speaker next month for Lean In, and that one will be face-to-face at our space that we've been using at Ovintiv in Republic Plaza. So shout out to Ovintiv for hosting us all year. We appreciate that for all of the face-to-faces, and down to our last quarter already. Hard to believe, the year is flying by. So, any other announcements? Anything I'm forgetting, WOGA folks? Nope, nope. All right. Well, very good. I think we will go ahead and get the party started then. We have two people leading today. Bonnie Elwood and her friend and colleague Ed Tate is going to be joining us about quarter past the hour, right, Bonnie?
Correct.
You think? Okay. So I will introduce you, Bonnie, and Bonnie, I'll let you tell us a little bit more about Ed since you know him much better than I do. I am thrilled to have Miss Bonnie Elwood as our starter here today. Any of you that haven't yet met Bonnie, she is in the industry. She's done a number of different roles. Was with Encana back in the day, most recently with Enerplus. She is an engineer by degree and I'm trying to remember what is your poly?
University of Texas.
No, but your polymath.
Oh,
Your fun word in your headline that is escaping me at the moment.
Yeah, polymath of petroleum engineering just means I've done a lot of different roles.
Okay, so there you go. Like normally I'm a wordy and would have had that, and I'm gonna blame GPA conference for me not firing on all cylinders as well as I should this morning. It's been a long week. I just got home last night, so forgive me on that one. But I've had the pleasure of knowing Bonnie and getting to call on her in my sales capacity for a number of years now. And she's always impressed me as someone who's very forthright, very genuine, very honest, friendly, fantastic connector. She's passionate about public speaking. She is another Toastmaster graduate, and some of you got to see our earlier one with oh my gosh, now I'm blanking on her name too. We had an international Toastmaster on a different presentation a few weeks ago. So with that said, I am going to let Bonnie go ahead and launch the program. Thank you, Ms. Elwood.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Kat. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to wait to introduce Ed when he shows up in about 15, 20 minutes. But to start with, I had a prep question for everyone, and some of them I've already answered in the chat box. But my question is, how many presentations do you give in a year? And what percentage of those presentations are virtual? And the intent of this is just to kind of highlight that this is a new medium for us. And a lot of us are using this medium just like we used the medium of being in person. But there's actually a different set of skills that we could adapt to improve our virtual presentations. And that's why we're here today. So I'm going to start off with telling a personal story for the first 10, 15 minutes about how I've used how I got involved with Toastmasters and public speaking, and how I've used that in a professional setting. My journey actually began in 2018. I found myself unemployed. And as many of us have been in that space, my instinct is to reach out to our community, our professional community. That could be WOGA, WIN, for me, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Denver Associated Professional Landmen. There's several throughout our community. So I dove deeply into Society of Petroleum Engineers and specifically their community outreach program. Oh, before I go any further, I do want to ask that you guys turn on your camera if you can. It just kind of makes it a little more human. You know, the reality is I am talking to myself in a room, but it is nice to kind of see you behind my camera. So if you are capable of doing so, I'd appreciate it. And if you're eating lunch, turn it on. You know, we used to eat lunch in person in front of each other at meetings. I know I went to a ton of lunch meetings early in my career as well. So back to my story. I got involved with SPE and community outreach, and doing so, I met the same people. We kept going, being the people that would go out to do the community outreach. A lot of times it would be working at high schools with engineering departments or educating elementary students on what oil and gas really is, you know, a lot of fun activities with the youth. And then there would also be some activities with like homeless people and hunger, et cetera, like that. But the same people would go. And there I met a friend of mine named Ben Nathan. Now, Ben and I got to talking, and he was also unemployed at the time. And we quickly realized that our resumes were basically the same. We were both petroleum engineers. He had a few years on me, both production engineers, artificial lift experts, self-proclaimed. But that he decided to befriend me, and like he was like, well, he wanted to challenge me to improve my skills. And he was like, hey, I learned about this Toastmaster club, Cherry Creek Toastmasters, and they have some of the most amazing people in this club. And I really think it would benefit you if you came and joined it. Please, Ben. I am an excellent public speaker. You see, as an extroverted engineer, I have oftentimes been the person on the team that has gone to the field and done well reviews, done safety talks, has talked to other departments about how we're going to improve our invoice workflow, et cetera, stuff like that. So to me, I thought I was a great public speaker, but I was going to entertain them. And I'm all about self-improvement, just like all of us here are, right? That's why we're here at WOGA and Lean In. Every month we learn something new. So I went to the Cherry Creek Toastmasters. My jaw absolutely dropped. I quickly found out that I was a great public speaker for an engineer. Now, engineers are great, okay? Like we solve a lot of really complex problems, but we're not known for our communication skills, okay? This isn't it. One of my favorite jokes is, how do you tell an introverted engineer from an extroverted engineer? The extroverted engineer will look at your shoes instead of their own. So I realized that my skill set, what I thought was phenomenal, was actually just because I was relating myself to other engineers. At Cherry Creek Toastmasters, I quickly met people of the caliber of Ed Tate, who I'll introduce, like I said, in a few minutes. And he is a professional public speaker, a keynote speaker. Like he has made a career out of public speaking. There's a handful of those people in this chapter. There's also storytellers, like very, how do I describe that? Very passionate people that have turned theatrics into storytelling. And that was an aha moment for me, because I actually come from a theatrical family. That's part of my extroversion. But from my head, I had always thought public speaking and talking about technical information, that means you got to talk monotone and show the slides and go through and be serious, deepen my voice. But that's not necessarily true. We can bring that theatrical piece in. You can bring your personality in, and you can convey your information even better. And it'll be memorable, which is an important part. And that is my goal today, is to be so engaging that you guys are not looking at your phone, you're not checking your email. I know I'm just another screen, but I hope that you're engaged to this screen. So that's my sales pitch for Cherry Creek Toastmasters. They meet at 7 a.m. on Thursday mornings in Cherry Creek. If anybody in the Denver area ever wants to come, I highly encourage it. I've met some amazing people. The bulk of the group is actually a bunch of retirees who spend their time giving back and mentoring and coaching people of our age. And it's just been phenomenal to meet these individuals. So I'll go into my professional. So I joined in 2018. And when I joined, I started to learn these skills over time. And in 2020, I got a job back at Interplus as an environmental specialist. And one of my first assignments was to do what they had as a climate disclosure project report that they do. Interplus is a Canadian-based company. Most companies don't do this report, so it's kind of unique for an oil and gas company to do so. For example, one of the questions was, how are you moving away from hydrocarbon combustion? Like, I don't really think we're going to move away from it. We're an oil and gas company. But nevertheless, we had to fill it out. From what I understood, for us to stop doing so, there was implications. And so we were kind of committed to doing it. But in reading through it, I learned that if we took some actions on educating our staff about emissions, that we would actually get credit. And so I went to management and was like, hey, can we pull our technical teams together and educate them on point sources for emissions? I got the go-ahead, and I had a series of informational meetings. There's 3 types of presentations. There's informational, informative, informational. There is influential, when you're trying to have an ask or a sales. And then there's also narrative, which is story. For me, I just incorporate the story piece into the other 2, but most of the time I'm either conveying information or I'm having an ask. So I had a series of meetings with all of our technical teams. We went through all of the point sources, educated everybody on how emissions were calculated, what the point sources are, and then theorized how could we improve it, either sharpening our pencil in the calculation methodology or reducing the emission by removing the process, improving the process, or if there was something we could do on the engineering side to eliminate it altogether. From there, one of my managers had a neighbor that had a small scale carbon capture technology. And we recognized that on-site combustion was one of our emission sources that was only going to increase. For Interplus, the bulk of their operations is on the Fort Berthold Reservation in North Dakota, and the grid power is not that great. And so we would burn natural gas to create our own energy to produce our oil and gas. And in doing so, that point source isn't going away. So the thought process was that if we can do this carbon capture on those engines, we now have an emission-free solution for our power generation. So I quickly started researching, how can we pilot this? What's our next step? And I found out that the North Dakota Industrial Commission had a group called the Clean Sustainable Energy Authority. Now, this was a set of funds set aside specifically for clean energy innovation. There was a portion that was grants, and there's a portion that was loans at a really good rate. And most of the people that had been tapping into this program was renewable sources like biofuels and other renewable energy sources, or ethanol plants. That's a biofuel as well. There was one interesting presentation I thought was where they were making plastic straws that weren't plastic, but were biodegradable, because we all hate paper straws, right? Like those just don't work. Bad idea. So I read through the objectives of the CSEA and I was like, I think we could apply to this. We meet all of the criteria. Like, let's take this technology and go ask the state of North Dakota to help us pay for the pilot. So my first presentation was to management, was an ask. And so I outlined the technology, I outlined the ask. And at the time, we even went so far as to ask for a sequestration law, which is a $20 million big egg in itself. It takes about 6 years from concept to actually being able to inject CO2. It's a quite convoluted process for anybody in the CCUS space. So we put together an application. I got approval from management. Again, that was my first ask. So using my presentation skills, using my power of influence that I've gained through Toastmasters, I was able to ask for that. And they said, sure, you can apply. I think they were just kind of sedating me and saying, yeah, this might work. So I applied for it on March 1st. And then there was a presentation mode. So I had to go in May of 22 and present on the application in front of the committee. Now, the setup for this was not ideal. There was a podium. It was a horseshoe in front of me of all the members of the CSEA. And then behind me, which I don't like people behind me when they're presenting, right? It's not ideal. But behind me was the peanut gallery of all my competition. And so there was a limited bucket for grant money, and there was a limited bucket for loans. And I was fortunate enough to be in the latter part of the day. I'd say I was about 2 o'clock, and it was a full agenda from 8 to 6. And that benefited me so much. If you ever put yourself in a competitive presentation mode, go later in the day, because there's so much power that you can get from watching who's your audience, the CSEA members, watching them, watching their response to who's presenting and what they're saying, and making note. Most of the people who went before me, there was one other female, but most of them were men. Most of them would get up there, puff up their chest. Oh, I've done this. I've done this. Oh, look at my team. We've done this. And it was just this big, arrogant, like, you can trust us with this money. We're going to make good use of it. I was the only oil and gas company operator there. There was another oil and gas innovator there that had like a vapor recovery unit flare solution. And we were the only two from the oil and gas industry. The rest, like I said, was renewables. When I stood up, I immediately made it about all of us, because we were all there for the same objective, to reduce emissions. And I restated the objective of the CSEA, to incentivize clean, sustainable energy in the state of North Dakota. And I even reached out to my fellow colleague with the vapor recovery unit system and said, hey, I hope he's successful, because I want to use his technology, because we're in this together. I was able to market myself and my passion for emissions growing up on the Houston Ship Channel. I made it personal. I made it memorable. And then I went through the presentation. But being able to read that room allowed me to kind of curtail my message to make it a win. I was the only person that received grant money that day. There was a lot of money given on the loan side. I was the only grant recipient, and we got $1 million to pilot the technology. So that was the big win. And it was using skills that I had gained through Toastmasters, something that I just did on a whim. Like, I didn't really think that this was going to be a piece of my career or where I was going, yet it was. So that was a big success for me. So this is kind of my overall message of never stop improving. Presentation skills matter, and little changes that you can make can have profound impacts. So with that, I see that Ed Tate has joined us, so I will give him a nice intro real quick. So I met Ed Tate through Cherry Creek Toastmasters. He is a proven business leader. For 14 years, he was a national account executive, he brought in over 500 million in projects and services. He co-created 2 businesses with revenue worth $1.25 billion with a B. He is an award-winning international speaker. Like I said, that's where I met him, is through Toastmasters. In 2000, he won the International Toastmasters World Championship Speaker out of 354,000 members representing 141 countries. What a journey. I can only imagine what that would be like. And then my personal favorite accolade of Ed Tate today, and that's what I will end on, is that Ed Tate is now the first male speaker for WOGA Lean In. So with that, let's give him a virtual round of applause. I'll introduce Ed.
Thank you. No, stop it. You're killing me. Thank you. So thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate that. My wife, let's see, this is, well, first of all, thank you for letting me be the first male on the Lean In session. I appreciate that. This is the 10th women-only organization I've spoken to in the past 3 years. My wife was wondering what's happening here. What's going on here, Ed? You're speaking only to the ladies, so she's slightly concerned. Anyway, if you think you're supposed to be laughing, you are. I'm funny. I just want to, get that clear really quick. But anyway, with regard to all those things she talked about me, you're going to see some words on the screen in a moment. And I'd like you to do the following. Please say this, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Everyone, please stand. Please stand. Please stand. Now adjust your cameras so that we're not just looking at your waist. you know, or your head's cut off. Just adjust your cameras, okay? And I want you to repeat the words that you see on the screen, okay? And I want you to say, Ed, so what? Who cares? What's in it for me? It's all about me. You can do the hand gestures. Okay, we're gonna do it again. Please turn to one of your virtual neighbors and say, neighbor, so what? Who cares? What's in it for me? It's all about me. All right, you may be seated, and you may adjust your cameras. Now, this is what people think every time you make a presentation, be it virtually or live. These are the questions that you must address. What's the so what? Who cares? What's in it for me? And make it all about me. And guess what? The audience is correct. As Bonnie was reading all those different things about me, some of you were thinking about this. You were thinking, blah, 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 blah. So what? Who cares? What's in it for me? Make it all about me. Please don't make this a waste of my time. And no one's actually going to say this out loud, just like we did right here. But guess what? Every time you make a presentation, you better address these questions. You better find out what's the so what? Why should people care? Make it all about them. Is this good stuff? Please turn to one of your virtual neighbors and tell them this guy's good. My wife is from South Africa, and she says every day, she says to me, humble, eh? She says it every day. I don't know why. I don't know why. Anyway, let's move on from here. So let's talk about this. What are your virtual presentation challenges? Actually, before I even get to this, I got another question for you. Please type in the chat. Actually, there's enough of us here. You know what? Can we unmute people? Is that okay? Is that allowed?
Everyone has control of their mute.
Okay, all right. So here's a question before you unmute. Is what are some things that you noticed about Bonnie's presentation? What did you notice about her presentation, her virtual presentation that was different from other virtual presentations that you've seen? Okay, so if you raise your hands or you can type in the chat, you choose. You're free to choose.
Standing up.
Is it Jessica? Okay,
yes,
so Jessica,
I was
go
going
ahead.
to say standing as well.
She was standing, okay? Okay, anybody else?
There were points where she leaned into the camera.
Okay, she leaned into the camera. She's actually playing around with the camera. Exactly. Okay. Now, by the way, I made the suggestion too, Bonnie, and the thing I love about Bonnie, she's an executor. We talked what was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I said, okay, we know what, you get more energy if you stand. We had a call yesterday to check in. Guess what? She had completely changed her studio. You know, so now she's standing, etc. And the reason I suggested that you stand is you always have natural energy. You have more energy when you're presenting, okay? So the other thing I talk about when it comes to virtual presentations is think of virtual presentations as what I call presentation prison, all right? So because guess what? You know, like this is like a scene from a movie. You know, you've got one person on one side of the pane of glass, another person on the other pane of glass. Well, guess what? I've got my pane of glass. You've got your pane of glass with your laptop, right? And with every pane of glass, guess what? We're weakening or lessening our connection with the audience. This is why virtual is so much more difficult than live. Raise your hands if you agree virtual is harder than live. Yes or no? And one of the reasons for that is because we've got this disconnect. So one thing that you have to do as a virtual presenter is you have to bring the energy. And how Bonnie did it was appropriate. I'm not talking jumping up and down. I'm not saying like they're doing the things like I do. I'm a naturally high energy individual. But what I am saying is you do have to bring it up higher than what you're accustomed to. Mentally, you've got to bring it up 20% approximately, just energy-wise. I'm not saying yelling. I'm not saying screaming. I'm thinking projecting so that people can feel your message and feel where you're coming from. Are you with me? Okay, thank you. So let's go back to making it about you. What are some of your virtual presentation challenges? What are your virtual presentation challenges? So please type that in the chat. Oh, actually, you know what? There's enough of us here. You just want to tell me, you can do that. You can unmute yourself. Just raise your hand and let me know. Okay, I see Chris.
I've got trouble often staying focused on my little camera instead of looking at all you, or doing a balance of taking the time to look at my audience and to see the engagement, but then remembering to look back at the camera, because that's the way that it looks like I'm looking at you to talk to you and not below you. So I struggle with that.
Exactly.
I get lost in a little black camera.
Okay. So, here's one thing. Let's see, right now, I'm looking at the camera right now. There's a blue dot on my camera. And a buddy of mine, his name is Mark Brown. He says, make sure you focus on your friends behind the lens. And what that means is focus on the camera. When I'm focusing on the camera, I'm actually making eye contact with you, contact you with the screen. Now I'm looking at the screen. I see you. Okay, guess what? My attention is, it's elsewhere. I'm not looking at the screen anymore. Now I'm looking at the screen. So one thing we have to condition ourselves is to look at our friends behind the lens. So one thing you might want to consider, and I know many of you probably work in an office and this is not an option for you, but sometimes what I will do is I'll have this camera right here, then I'll have a wide display in the background if it's a wide zoom. So for example, sometimes I give Zoom presentations in front of like close to 1,000 people. In that case, I'm going to have multiple screens. And I'll have like one screen here, another screen here, another screen here. And what I'll do is I'm still looking at the lens. However, the people are in back of me. So when I'm looking at the people and the lens at the same time, I'm making eye contact with them. So that's one thing that you can do, if you will. All right, so who else? Other challenges? Okay, I see Danielle.
Yep. I was going to say, I mean, it kind of goes in with that, but also like I travel a lot for work, right? And so when I go to the other offices, they're set up differently. Like I had that problem 2 days ago when I was in Tulsa and I had to sit at somebody else's office, someone else's desk. Nothing was set up the way that I needed it to be set up. I just kind of had to roll with it. And so that is a challenge as well.
Exactly. Well, the one thing I'm inviting you to do is if you go to a different facility or you go to you're using someone else's office, if you can get there like a day before or arrive early, set it up as much as you possibly can, and then test it and walk through it. That way you don't have any challenges. So for example, today, I've rented out an office today. I gave 2 back-to-back virtual presentations. One of the reasons I want to do that is because this place has very, very fast internet, and I'm spread out all over the place. That is, I've got my laptop right here. I've got a camera right here. I actually have another laptop that actually has my PowerPoint presentation on it, so I can actually just switch back and forth like this very quickly without doing the Zoom thing of share, find the thing, and then you guys know what I'm talking about. Okay, so this actually saves me a couple steps, if you will. All right, but anyway, the thing that you want to do is you want to practice, you want to rehearse, regardless of where you are. And then some things that you might want to do is just maybe take some equipment with you. So, for example, when I travel, sometimes I have like a little tiny tripod I'll take with me, and this camera right here, this is a Huddle Cam. So this Huddle Cam it's a separate. It's not my laptop camera. It's a different one. It's small enough for me to pack it in a bag. And occasionally what I'll do is I'll just use this small tripod and I can position it someplace else. I like to position the camera at eye level. Right now I'm standing up, I'm at eye level. So that way I'm making contact with you. Plus it's also very energetic. It looks kind of weird if you have a camera looking down like this, or having the camera almost, if your screen is at a certain angle, you're looking up your nose. So those are some things that you want to avoid. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Any other challenges? No? Okay. We'll keep moving on. We'll keep moving on.
I was just gonna say, making sure that the other people are engaged, especially if they're not on camera, trying to pull cues out of them.
So first of all, I appreciate the dozen of you who actually have their camera on. I really, really appreciate that. I refuse to give a virtual presentation in front of a wall of names or pictures. I will tell audiences, turn on your cameras. I'm working hard here, okay? I don't care what your living room looks like. I don't care what your bedroom looks like, you know? I could be looking better. I forgot my makeup today, so hey, because, and here's the other reason. Speaking is an active skill. It's an active skill. And what do I mean by that? It is energy. And we get energy by looking at people. I'm getting energy just feeding off your faces. I appreciate that Amanda and Melanie have been laughing at my jokes. I appreciate that. They don't realize this, but they're going to have cash prizes. So so everybody else fake it. All right. But again, I just made like a simple joke, but I see smiling faces. Guess what? That gives me energy. And that makes it easier for you to present, getting energy. So will everyone turn on their screens? No, but enough will that you can actually have energy going back and forth. So again, this is an active skill. This is an energy game, and treat it that way. Treat it like an energy game. Okay. Anybody else?
I have one.
All right, let's move on.
Wait, Ed, I have
Yes.
one. I have one where
Yeah.
I struggle with if it's a technical concept, whether or not the people are understanding what I'm communicating. Like in person, you usually have some nods or you have some like feedback, but a lot of times virtually, you don't get that biofeedback. So I struggle with that.
Well, one of the reasons, again, you have I'm not in my regular studio. My regular studio is I'll have like a big screen there. So I can actually see people's faces. I can actually see their eyes, their nods and things of that nature. I can also see if they appear to be confused. And again, I'll ask and I have a philosophy, leave no learner behind. So before I move on with another idea, another concept, I'm going to check in. Does that make sense? What questions do you have? Is that clear? Please type in a chat if it's not completely clear with you. So you're right, Bonnie. You have to exhibit extra effort, extra energy to make sure that everyone's coming along with you. Otherwise, the confused mind will not listen and the confused mind will not follow. They will not stay on the webinar. Okay, so you constantly checking in. Okay, all right. Let's move on from here. We already talked about this. We already talked about like how virtual is presentation present. And here's something else you also got to keep in mind as well. Let me put me back up here. Is you're competing with other screens. You're competing with other screens. What do I mean by that? You're competing against YouTube, TikTok, television, other screens. And guess what? In this format, people are expecting to see something interesting. Almost, they're expecting to see something entertaining, if you will. That's what you're competing against. So you've got to bring that element of interest, if not entertainment, to your presentations. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be an entertainer. I'm not saying that at all. I'm about to share with you a tool, a technique. It's called PACE elements. PACE elements alone will make your presentations more interesting. You standing will be more interesting. You checking in with the audience, that will be more interesting. Asking them engaging questions will make it more interesting. By the way, here's the rule. In a live presentation, when I'm speaking or presenting, I have to make a change in the way I deliver my presentation every 7 to 10 minutes. So for example, in this case, Bonnie, she began with a story. Her story lasted approximately 10 minutes. And then she introduced me. That was another change. We pay attention to changes. However, on virtual presentations, you got to make changes every 2 to 3 minutes. A change could be me like going back and forth between my PowerPoint slides, etc. Me, asking you guys, raise your hands, talk to me, type in chat. Those are different changes. It doesn't have to be a big change, but it has to be a change. You cannot just talk in monotone. And you cannot do what a lot of people normally do. That is, they run to their PowerPoint slides and they read their slides to the audience. You talk about death by PowerPoint. If it doesn't work live, Virtual people will tune you out. They will definitely tune you out. And here's something else to keep in mind. Not only are you competing with screens, you're also competing with distractions. So if you're working at home, you've got, there's kids or family members, there could be clocks. If you're in the office, you're competing with other screens. You've got your laptop, you've got your email, you've got your phone, etc. And when you're presenting, other people are checking out things. You can always check. You can always tell when someone is actually, they're typing because all of a sudden their eyes drop. You can always tell, but you're competing against this. And as Bonnie talked about, I never actually verbally say this, but my goal is to be so interesting that people pay attention to me as opposed to pay attention to something else. And that's my goal. That's my objective. That should also be your goal for every single one of your presentations. How could I be so interesting? How can I be so compelling that people will focus on me and not other distractions? This is what you're up against. Ideally, you want to eliminate those distractions, and someone's already mentioned it. The key word is engagement. So let me show you some engagement tools, or what I call PACE elements, that will help make your presentations a little bit more engaging and keep the focus on you. Number one is what we call a well-told story. So again, in this case, Bonnie began with a story. The story doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a professional speaker. It could be a story about the topic or the subject. And again, Bonnie talked about joining Toastmasters. That's a place for you to practice your stories in a safe environment, but telling a brief story. Here's something, there's a book. Oh man, I cannot think of it. It is, tell you what I'll do. I can't think of the name of the book. If I can't remember the name of the book before the end of this session, I'll get it to Bonnie and I'll make sure that she gets it to you. But Jerome Berner is the PhD from Harvard. And if you want people to remember statistics and data, by the way, statistics and data are abstractions. By themselves, they're very difficult to remember. In fact, there's statistic after statistic between a story and statistics. People remember stories 65% of the time. They remember statistics and data only 5% of the time. And the reason they only remember statistics and data is 5% of the time because data and statistics are abstractions. However, if you want people to remember your numbers, you want them to remember your data, put it in a story. It makes the numbers 22 times more memorable than the facts by themselves. So Jerome Berner, can't think of the name of the book. I'll get the name of the book so I can actually track down that fact for you. But that's the power of telling a well-told story, okay? Next is talking heads. So for example, when we go back and forth, when I talk with you or me and Bonnie are talking, that's what we call a talking head. Guess what? That's a change. That's something else that people are going to pay to. We are wired to pay attention to changes, no matter how small. The changes don't have to be big. You just have to embed them in your presentations. A slide share, sharing your slides. This is, and me going back and forth, guess what? That is a change, okay? Guess what? It's a small change, but it's keeping you engaged. Psychologically, and our body is programmed to pay attention to changes, okay? Our eyes, they focus on changes. That's why video games are so addictive. Video games are changing just like this. Guess what? You're constantly, and before you know it, what is it, 2 or 3 hours or 2 or 3 days later, you're done playing your games? Okay. All right. Next. Video clips. So I don't have any video clips today, but if you had a short, specific video clip, that's another way of engaging people. A buddy of mine uses just audio clips. So you can use audio clips. Again, that's another type of change. Type in the chat. So again, that's another type of change. It's a form of engagement. Number 4, raise your hands if. So I've had you raise your hands. I've also had you type in the chat. So let me just read the chat here. Jessica wrote down, not sure if folks are paying attention when they're keeping their phone, when they're keeping their cameras off. That's a very, very good point, okay? Next. a poll. So Zoom has the capability of having a poll. Now, here's a nuance about polls. You can do, oh God, there's two types of polls you can do. There is a public poll, or you can actually do a poll through chat. The problem with chat is, like, if there is a sensitive topic or a sensitive subject, I would not use chat as a tool, because a person's name is attached to it. However, if you use a poll, you can use something called an anonymous poll, and that way, if it's a sensitive topic or a sensitive subject, people can vote. They'll contribute to the poll without risk of having their names exposed. So that's a little nuance between chat and polls. So ask yourself the question: is this a sensitive topic or subject? If this is a sensitive topic or subject, and people, and if it's really sensitive and it's chat, no one's going to contribute. They're not going to type at all. They'd rather not risk typing something that later on could come back to haunt them. So that's why I'll use an anonymous poll. So that's another tool that you can use. Visuals, okay? Pictures, images, things of that nature that make your point, okay? And we've had images and visuals in my PowerPoint slides. Let's see, breakout rooms. That's the one thing I love to use in Zoom, is breakout rooms, putting people into conversations where they can talk about a topic or a subject. Again, that's another PACE elements. These are just, again, my favorite, what I call PACE elements that I use in presentations that completely engage people. Okay, Q&A. We're going to have Q&A at the end of this session today. Okay, and again, that's another PACE element. It's another change. It's another way of keeping the audience engaged virtually. Let's see, a whiteboard. Zoom has a whiteboard in it. I don't know if you know that. Okay, but you can actually use a whiteboard. Now, I'm not going to use a whiteboard because I forgot my fancy pen, and me writing a whiteboard with my fingers, you would not be able to read it at all, etc. All right. I actually have my home office set up. I actually have a whiteboard right here, and sometimes I'll actually write on the whiteboard there. Again, that's another way of keeping people engaged. Finally, something called keepers. Keepers. A keeper is an idea that you like. So we're going to test this idea out right now. So what I'd like to do is right now type in chat, please, what are some of your keepers? What are some of the ideas that Bonnie and I have shared with you so far that you might use in your next virtual presentation? Please type that in the chat. Okay, so we got here. We got a lot. Thank you. Let's see. Standing up, looking directly at the camera. Thank you, Vicki. Call specific participants out to answer questions. Now, you've got to be cautious on this one. You got to be cautious on this one. Make sure they're paying attention. Make sure they're focused. If someone is not paying attention, you don't want to surprise them and embarrass them. So that's the danger of calling people out. So one thing I will do is I will have guidelines in a longer virtual presentation. For example, I do full day programs. In a longer program, we'll have guidelines. And one of the guidelines is, hey, I will call on you. However, it's okay for you to pass. So again, you don't want to risk embarrassing people. So that's the issue there. I love the whiteboard idea. Thank you, Melanie. Making change every couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. Build that into your presentation. I literally have in my presentation, in my notes, is PACE element, PACE element, PACE element. And I number them: PACE element number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, throughout my entire presentation. Right now, my slides are in presenter mode on my other computer, and I can actually see in this case, the keepers. In the notes, it says pace element, okay? So that way, you can have two different types of presentations. You can have your same presentation. You can have a live one that you give, or you can have a virtual or a hybrid presentation. And again, the hybrid presentation has to be a little bit more, build in more interactivity in that presentation. I submit to you, you probably use that virtual presentation live, and it'll be a lot more interesting. All right, what else do we have here? Standing during presentations, camera in front of the eye at eye level. Okay, standing, making changes every couple of minutes. Real whiteboard and standing up. Standing up during the presentation, need periodic pace changes, and everyone loves standing. Mobile camera. By the way, here's something else that's cool too, is Zoom has a capability of, like, I have a switcher. So I actually have this little fancy little switcher. I can actually take my cell phone and I can actually make that another camera. So that's another way of having a pace element. So obviously I take my little tripod, take my camera, or I also have one that can actually take an iPad, and this little switcher, I can actually switch cameras, if I will, if I really want to be fancy. That's usually for my paid customers. Not happening today, but maybe one day, okay? But that's something else to consider. You can actually, just having a 2-camera shoot, just going back and forth. All right, let's move on from here. And I believe, Bonnie, it is your turn.
Thank you, Ed. That was a lot of great information. I'm going to kind of recap some of my favorite pieces and also go over virtual presentations for technical information. So I was going to do a little bit of a do's and don'ts. I'll start with, like, know your background. Like, if you look at my background, I have my diploma nicely framed right here. Above it, I have when University of Texas won the national championship in 2005. This is our year, guys. And then over here, I have my printer and I have my reference material as an engineer. I also want to point out lighting. I have an overhead light, but I do not have it turned on. There's a window behind my setup, my screen. And there's also a light that I have illuminating the wall because I found that to be the softest light where you could see me. And I have some lamps in the corner as well. The biggest help for me has been reorienting my camera. You know, usually I have your camera sitting on top of your screen. And again, standing up and moving back, it's easier for me to make the eye adjustment from the camera to your face. And it doesn't seem as drastic. Whereas when I'm here, and you're making that movement, it's a lot more obvious. So another reason to stand up and almost like back up a little bit. So I'm enjoying that a lot from this learnings. So orientation where you are, I would suggest not using virtual backgrounds if you're the presenter. You're gonna wanna be animated. And the last thing, you know how it gets pixelated if you talk with your hands or if you're moving your head too much. The only time I think virtual backgrounds would work is if you have a green screen behind you where it has that very cool, crisp edge and you won't have that graying effect. So that's one piece of advice as well. For technical presentations, you know, I go to so many, you know, I'm a nerd, I love to learn and I want to hear it all. And we have a tendency to just pack our slides, right? Like so much information in there, like 3 or 4 charts, we're going to go through it all. That's fine. And I've actually gotten to the point with PowerPoint where I'll build my story, my technical story through PowerPoint, and it helps me in my head kind of walk through how I got to my conclusions, whatever the topic is. You can build your presentation like that, but you also need to make a quicker presentation for your actual presentation. So like take those slides and simplify them. Ed taught me this really cool trick. He said, your slide, you want to make it just enough data to where if you were driving down the road at 55 miles per hour, you could read it. And so you got to take all those, like all of those graphs and stuff that we love to see and simplify it down, and then keep your other slide deck maybe below it so that if your participants, you know, getting the slide deck later, they'll have the technical information behind it. But during the presentation, you're hitting the key notes and keeping them engaged without overwhelming them with the data. That's a good suggestion that I've gotten out of this as well. Leaving it in presentation mode, again, that's kind of like what he talked about with the pace elements. You know, don't do that. I think it's really powerful to turn off and like look straight into the camera and really kind of try to engage with people and make it human as much as possible. I think that was. And I think that was everything I wanted to cover as far as my setup and what I think do's and don'ts work. But I wanted to kind of open it up to everybody else, maybe a discussion real quick. Do's and don'ts and presentations that you've learned through the years, or obviously since COVID, I think we've all adopted virtual presentations more so. But does anybody have anything they'd like to share?
This applies towards both live and virtual presentations. Your presentation is not a recital. That is, your job is not to read the slides to the audience, all right? And that's why we say just have a couple trigger words on your slides. We want people focusing on you. We want not your slides. People can't, they can't multitask. They can either focus on you or they can focus on their slides. They will not do both. So that's why you want limited, just, trigger words, if you will, on your slides, possibly images that support that, and then have them focusing on you. Because if it's a wall of words, then we don't need you. To be perfectly frank, hey, just send me the slide deck. I'll read the deck. I don't even need to be at the meeting. Okay, Bonnie?
Does anybody else have anything to add? We can, I don't know if anybody needs to leave at the top of the hour, so I do want to give anybody that might need to leave at 1 an opportunity for questions.
I was just gonna say, Bonnie, your setup looks great. The lighting is great. Great idea on, not being able to just kind of see the Ring camera in your eyes. When people or somebody's wearing glasses and you can see their Ring camera, or their ring light, it's fine, but it's pretty distracting, I think. So I might switch mine up a little bit.
Great.
I know I'm still getting used to, I guess it's more so on virtual, but also even in live presentations, being okay with pauses and silence. Especially when, you're trying to engage with people and you're giving them time to ask a question. To me, it feels like that silence feels like forever at times when it's really not.
If you ask a question, you have to give people time to think about it. And there's nothing wrong with pausing. For example, I'm just looking at chat. Let me pull chat back up. I've got dozens upon dozens of answers here. And guess, how I got these answers? I paused. I allow people to think. And more specifically, I allow people to type. I know it's counterintuitive. The more you pause, the more authority that you have, the more confidence you're perceived. I know it's counterintuitive. For example, for 13 years, I've coached, it's called the Financial Leadership Development Program at Johnson & Johnson. These are college graduates, MBA students who just graduated from college. And we coach them on public speaking skills. What they always try to do is fill the air with words, with no breathing, nothing. And they actually come off as less authoritative than we teach them to pause. We teach them to take breaks. And the reason you want your audience thinking about your content. And it's not a race, it's not a rush. So pauses actually work for you, not against you.
Yeah. And I have an analogy for that as well. I was a trumpet player, I still am, and I played in a big symphony. And if you've ever been to the symphony and the orchestra, I think of Carmina Burana, which is a famous song. And it's like, bum, 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 pause. But the reason the next chords are so powerful is because of that pause. Bum, 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 bum. And so it's the same with your speaking. When you create pauses, it creates drama. It pulls your audience in, and they're going to actually pay attention more so. And I was the same way. I would just talk 90 to nothing because I'd be nervous. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to fill up every second. I can't take this anymore. And I would do that. And Toastmasters taught me to kind of sit back and learn that power of that pause.
Well, before you guys go, have I earned the right to make an offer to you? Now, you can choose to use it or not. It's entirely up to you. But I actually, like 5 times a year, we do a program called Mastering Virtual Presentations. It's a 2-day course where we dive in deep. We talk about equipment. We talk about actually in the course, we actually have people give. Day one is about all the things you can do to make your virtual presentations, breathe life into them. And day two is we actually have you give a 10-minute virtual presentation, and other audience members give you feedback as well. It is one of the things, I love this course because it truly transforms people literally in one session. Well, I've got the home study version of that. That program is, it's a 2-day course. You deliver engaging online presentations. You avoid mistakes. If you're interested in it, on my website, if you go to my website right now, it sells for $397. If you're interested, take a picture of this or use the QR code and you'll get it for $197 today. So, or you can, again, just do a screenshot. And if the QR code doesn't work, use it's a bit.ly virtual presentations 2. So bit.ly/capital virtual, capital P and presentations, the number 2. All right.
Do you want to put your QR? There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Keep doing that. I see it just fine. I don't know what the problem is, guys.
My inclination.
So you
would
can take a screenshot if you want.
to screenshot it.
Yeah. All right, and I will stick around for as long as you like to answer any questions.
Thank you
Was
so
this valuable for you?
for coming. I really appreciate it. This was a cool opportunity to get to work with Ed. Like I said, he's been a mentor of mine, but to actually work with him and provide some content for Woga was quite rewarding. So thank you, Kat, and thank you, everyone.
Excellent presentation. I have a quick question, and it is potentially more related to in-person presentations, but now that I should be standing, I guess it applies. I have a really bad habit of changing my posture, the weight of my feet from one side to the other. And it's even if I'm trying to be conscious of it, is there any tips on that, or do I just need to practice not doing that? Okay,
it's called weight shifting. Okay. Yep. Do you see how you look like a swaying building, right? Now, live, it's not as noticeable unless you're really moving from side to side. The taller you are, the more noticeable it is. So, for example, men who are 6'5", 6'4", etc. This is going to sound really weird, and this is how I coach other people. I'm not trying to be sexist or offensive. So that's my come from, the next words which come out of my mouth. Okay. All right. So here's the word that'll fix this. Proud chest. So everyone right now, stand up, proud chest. And I tell this to men as well. But anyway, proud chest, what happens is, heads up high, shoulders are back. Your arms are shoulder width apart, and your arms are like this right here. And you don't necessarily have to move. This also gives you authority. It gives you power. It's literally a power pose. Now, if you choose to move, move. But the thing I want to invite you to do, if you want to move, move, and then stay there for a couple seconds, if you will. And then you could talk, or you can make a point, etc. And then if you want to move again, you can move. The reason you're swaying is because it's that nervous energy. Okay. So guess what? Move. Okay. Take a step or two. And then just plant, proud chest. If you talk with your hands, there's nothing wrong with you talking with your hands. Don't talk with your hands with paper, because this is a distraction. Or if you have a pen in your hand, that could be a distraction. It's okay to talk with your hands, but don't have something else in your hand. All right. Was that helpful for you? Okay. Anybody else? Questions, comments? I charge tens of thousands of dollars. This is your chance here, folks. This is for free. So, after that, the meter runs, man. I'm an Uber. Kidding. How else can I support you? Let's see. Let me check the chat. See if there's anyone typing anything in chat, because not everyone is on the screen. Okay, I see no other questions there. And I could take questions about, live presenting as well if you want.
I was gonna say, while you're looking at things, Ed, how can we help support you more? Do you have any asks of the group on how we can help get the word out about your practice? I know that you're on LinkedIn. Are you willing to have everybody connect on LinkedIn?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, yes.
Perfect.
Ed Tate CSP. That's my
And what
LinkedIn
I would
address.
suggest is when if you do reach out, you don't have just a follow, Ed, correct? You have an actual invite button.
Yeah,
or-
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Yep.
what I would coach is reference this meeting and say, yes, we met at the Woga Lean In, loved your presentation, want to
Yes.
connect, something like that.
Yes, please put in Woga, because otherwise I literally get hundreds of requests every week.
Yeah.
I just spoke in California and I got close to 1,000. Geez. So thankfully I have a team who they go through that and that's their job. But like if you type in Woga, I personally will click the yes button from there. Okay.
Since
All right,
I
Bonnie.
did open it up, I was going to give you an opportunity to do a broader commercial. You mentioned that one program. What else do you have for corporate type authoring, Ed?
Oh, okay. Well, most of my clients know me in one specific space, and that is that there's a program called Making Managers into Leaders. We've had over 52,000 executives go through this program in 69 countries, 2,000 companies, most of the Fortune 100, et cetera. I've been teaching that course, or that comes in a keynote format, that comes in a workshop format, et cetera. And a lot of my customers and clients know me in that space for delivering that particular program. It is a program. It's a couple tools. Let's talk about some things that make it different from other leadership development courses. So one thing we have is something called the 5 action steps. The 5 action steps is a tool that is an alternative to the traditional way that we solve problems. For example, I used to work for IBM, and this is how we used to, solve problems. Number one, we, identify the problem. Number 2, find the cause, which was code for who's to blame. We would either bring in someone from the outside or an executive to tell us what we need to do differently. And then step number 4 is to overcome all the resistance that we've created with steps 1, 2, 3. Is anyone familiar with this technique? So the 5 action steps is that, again, by the way, I'm not criticizing that particular model. If that model works for you, it's producing results, don't change just because you went to a workshop. I'm a fan of what works. Use what works for you. However, if you're stuck, then the 5 action steps is a tool to help you look at a problem or a challenge or a project in a completely different way. And it asks a series of completely different questions. Question number 1, what's already working? Now, this is completely counterintuitive to how we go about solving problems. The traditional problem model is, hey, what's the problem, et cetera. This is the model that, again, we're inviting you to look at things completely different. So what's already working? Step number 2, what is the benefit? I take that back. Step number 1, what's already working? Step number 2, what specifically causes it to work? So again, my background is in sales. Let's say, for example, my goal is to be 100% of plan. Right now, we are 60% of plan. So step number 1 is what's working? What got me to 60%? Step number 2, what specifically caused it to work? What are the specific steps that I took to get to 60%? In the problem solving model, we're looking at what caused the problem in the first place. What we're doing here is analyzing success. Step number 3 is what is the goal? And the goal is, what are we trying to accomplish? Well, in this particular example I'm giving you is to be 100% of plan. Well, what we've just done is we've identified the gap. Step number 1 was, what's working? We're 60% of plan. Step number 3 is the goal. We want to be 100% of plan. The gap is 40%. Is everyone with me? Step number 4 is, what will be the benefit of achieving the goal? What would be the benefit for the organization? What would be the benefit for my department? What would be the benefit for me individually? This is the what's in it for me stage, like what we talked about earlier. And step number 5, and this is where the 5 action steps is completely different from the traditional model of solving problems, is who will do what by when, and what do we do? What do we need to do more of, less of, or delete? So what do we need to do more of, less of, or delete, and who will do what by when? Step number 5 is the accountability step. It is, have you ever had this experience? You talk about a problem ad nauseum at a meeting. A week goes by, maybe a month goes by, you talk about the same problem and there's been no progress. Well, the difference by using the 5 action steps is we actually assign accountability with due dates to people. And then when we get together again, we talk about, okay, so since we get together last, what happened? We asked a question, what's working? Hopefully we've made progress. Maybe we're at 65%, maybe we're at 70%. Well, what caused that? What caused the change from 60% to 70%? What specifically caused the change? What's our goal? We continually ask the question, what's our goal? Have you ever had this experience? The goal changed on a project? Has it ever happened to anybody? Just me? Okay, all right. But you want to check in. Do we still have the same goal, or have circumstances changed that the goal is different? You know, COVID changed everyone's goals. Okay. Now, again, step number 4, what's in it for us? And step number 5, okay, now, what do we need to do more of, better, or differently, or less? And who will do what by when? Again, we assign it again, repeat. So that's one of the tools that we talk about. And we actually walk people through it depending on the format. In a keynote format, I just describe it to you just like I did here. In a workshop format, we want you to bring your actual problems. And we actually walk you through this tool. And you walk away with what we call in writing a sloppy first copy of some answers to try out and test in the world. We have this one format, it's called a transformation. That is, we actually come into your office for a week. So, day 1, we talk about a problem, a challenge, etc. We workshop whatever that problem is. Okay, we want you to go back out into your world and test some of these things out. We come back day 2, any results, etc. And then we introduce you to another tool. And then day 3, we do the same thing, day 4, and then we come back about 6 weeks later. And the goal here is, this is not theory. This is, we give you actual results. You make progress on actual problems in your area. So anyway, that's one of the most powerful tools, and that's what separates that program from everybody else. Does that sound good? And and we've accomplished some results. Probably the most, there was a $100 million project, and with, let's see, what is it? With 10 months to go, they were 18 months behind schedule. If they were 1 day late, it was a $30 million penalty. And for every month they were late, $2 million after that. So again, 1 day late, $30 million, 18 months behind schedule, times $2 million per month. That's an additional, $36 million for a total of $66 million in penalties and fees. They were able to complete that project in 9 months, 1 month ahead of schedule, avoiding $66 million in penalties and fees. That is the power of this particular tool. And the other thing I like about this tool is when I used to live in Denver, I used to be assistant football coach of a group of Bad News Bears, the Aurora Youth League Rams. We only won 2 games in 2 years. All right. Anyway, I was exposed to some of the concepts in making managers into leaders. And one day I said to myself, these tools, that not only do they work at work, they also work in our personal lives as well. So one of the things they talk about is focus. And we have rules of focus. One law of focus is you get more for what you focus on. So if you tell a child that they're messing up, guess what? They're going to see that more often. However, if a child does something right, you want to acknowledge that behavior. So for example, you ever say to a child, don't spill the milk? What happened to the milk? Spills everywhere. However, what you should say, what I should say is, honey, hold the cup with both hands. You want to paint the picture of the behavior that you want. Well, anyway, we had, again, Bad News Bears, 2 games, 2 years. We had a strong arm quarterback, and that quarterback, he would always overthrow the receivers. And we would say, stop overthrowing the receivers. And then and then other kids, you know, they would drop the ball. Stop dropping the ball, you know. And then, you know, it occurred to me, it's just like paint the picture of the behavior that you do want. So tell the quarterback to hit the receivers. Tell the receivers to catch the ball. Describe the behavior that you want. So anyway, I was trying this new approach. Anyway, we have a new season, and we lose the first game, the second game, and the third game. They want to fire Coach Tate from a volunteer position. You know, all the parents are in, you know, this touchy-feely stuff, it doesn't work, etc. They literally had a meeting about me. You know, it was just like, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You know, we've only won 2 games in 2 years, you know, and you want to go back to the way that we know for a fact it doesn't work. And I said to him, I says, hey, I think the boys and the girls are starting to get it. By the way, we had girls on our team. Let me tell you something about those girls. Hardest workers on the entire team. They knew they weren't physically as strong as the boys, so they worked on their technique. And I cannot tell you, time and time again. I remember like one time we were playing the, oh man, what was it? What was the name of this team? Oh, they were like in first place. And Mount Bello Falcons. We were playing the Mount Bello Falcons. And there's this one kid who actually went to the pros. And he had the ball, and one of our girls was right in front of him, and he was just thinking like, I'm gonna squash her. She wiped his butt out. She wiped him out, forced him to fumble. We beat the Falcons for the first time in 6 years because of her. Anyway, never forget that as long as I live. Anyway, here's what happens. We win the next game, 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 the next game. We're 7-3. In Colorado, there's something called the Bronco Bowl. It is a state championship based on age group. It's the first time we've been in playoffs in years. So we win that first game. It's I think it's 17-14. Then we win the second game, 21-19. We're in a championship game. We are in the Bronco Bowl. And the thing that was so cool about this was watching these children transform in terms of their confidence. You know, it didn't matter if we won the championship or not. These kids were so transformed by, again, the enlightened leadership approach is to focus on your strengths, focus on what you're doing right, not focusing on what you're doing wrong. It's encouraging, it's building, you know, your confidence. And anyway, so it's a championship game, and I'll never forget this. Now, by the way, our kids were really, really concerned about the championship game because we're playing a group of kids down in Colorado Springs, and they had won the championship like 6 or 7 years in a row. And we saw them practice. Oh my God, they look like pros. And I had to fake it as a coach. I'm thinking like, I don't know if we could do this, you know? So anyway, we had a conversation with the kids because you could see it in their face that they were concerned about, you know, watching this other team. I says, hey, what's going on here, guys? I said, well, we don't think we can do it. Those kids are a lot bigger than we are. And I said, well, hey, let's focus on what can you do that they can't, you know? And they said, well, you know, we probably can outrun them. I said, well, why do you say that? Well, at school, you know, the bullies chase us every day. So we made a shift in our focus for the championship game based on our children's strength, and that was their speed. Anyway, here's what happens. We kick off the ball to them. One of our kids forces a fumble. They take it to the house. So within the first 5 seconds of the game, we're up 7-0. We kick off the ball again to them. This time they don't fumble it. They throw the ball. One of our kids intercepts it, again, using our speed. It's not even 1 minute into the game. We're up 14-0. I'll jump to the end. We won the state championship 54-8. And we had the same kids that we had the previous year. We had girls. We were smaller. We had all the reasons, all the excuses to not win and not be successful. And that didn't happen. And I submit to you the following. If these principles that we talk about in enlightened leadership work with, in this case, 8, 9, 10-year-old boys and girls, these principles will work with you as well. So by the way, I'm a speaker. Sometimes I think I get paid by the word. So anyway, so forgive me. I hope you enjoyed that story.
That was a
So,
fantastic
Bonnie?
story. Ed. Thank you. That
Oh, thank you.
that was even more than I was hoping for.
Oh, I love that story. Oh my goodness. A side story. My son was on the team and he was the starting fullback, one of the kids who carries the ball. And it was after he went to East Ridge Elementary, which is a Cherry Creek school. And you're supposed to have something called a weigh-in. So the kids are to hop on the scale and to make it fair, because you don't want a super big kid, carrying the ball over a smaller kid. And so anyway, so my son was like in one of these moods. I don't know if have your kids ever been in a mood, and he was in this mood because we had to go to the weigh-in on a school night. Anyway, so he's got all his football equipment. He's got on his helmet, and what the kids usually normally do is they take off all their equipment. They hop on the scale. Anyway, he hops on the scale with all of his equipment. Because he hops on the scale with all of his equipment, he exceeds the limit in terms of being a ball carrier. So he's just lost his starting position. And I tell the lady, hey, come on, these are kids. And she says, wait, once you hop on the scale, that's it. He has to learn responsibility. And she was right. She was right. So my son wanted to quit. And I said, nope, we're Tates. If you choose not to play football next year, that's up to you. But right now we're going to stick this thing out. Well, anyway, one day we discover in practice that since David knows all the offensive plays, he was a better center than another kid that we had. And the offense just worked that much better. So hindsight, David actually hopping on the scale and losing his starting position actually contributed to us winning the state championship. So he's happy. We've got this trophy in his hands, and I looked at him and he's got tears in his eyes, tears of joy. And I said, hey, aren't you glad you didn't quit? So I was able to teach him a valuable lesson about not quitting as well.
Awesome.
So we've really gone off the topic here.
It wouldn't be a lean-in if we didn't go have some rabbit trails. That's all good.
Okay, thank you. And be more than happy to come back and support. If you guys have an annual conference, we could talk about me speaking at your conference. I'd love to do that as well. So
We
Maybe,
do now.
What can you explain Lean In, our monthly series? Kat?
Yeah, so
Say
it's
again?
actually going to shift somewhat next year. I think, do we land on 8 sessions, Danielle? Yeah. So the last couple of years we've gone for the full 12, and we've seen some lower numbers certain months. So we're trying to target hitting when people are actually going to be around and participate. And I think we are still going to stick with a virtual and face-to-face combination because that aspect worked really well. We love the face-to-face more than anything, but we understand that people are not always in Denver or not always able to get here. So what the virtual has done is given us access to folks like you that are in different places to come in and present. It gives us the ability to have other members that are no longer in Denver area at least get on, every other meeting, that type of thing. So, yeah, it's been really great. I have mixed feelings of joy, relief, excitement, etc. of handing the program over next year. Danielle is going to be taking it over along with Tian Do, who unfortunately is not here today. I think she's trying to actually still take a little maternity leave. So she should be having a little bit of downtime. But I'm very excited about having some new blood, some new excitement, some younger ladies coming through with some different angles on some of the same messaging that we've had over the last couple of years. So it's going to be a phenomenal transition.
Great. Well, congratulations. Well, it's been a pleasure for me to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Ed. And Bonnie, thank you. You will be receiving thank you cards. I always do handwritten thank yous after, so I will need to get your address, please, Ed. And
Okay.
And any last questions? I see some positive
Danielle.
emojis.
She's applauding.
I think it was a clap.
Separately though, I will say I enjoyed that story about your son because we're going through some of the same things with our son right now, learning about soccer and school and how you have to put in the hard work and everything too. A lot of the time he kind of wants to just quit if he doesn't have that immediate result, that he's wanting. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
definitely.
and this was recorded, so you can just show him the whole story.
Yeah.
You don't have to try to regurgitate it.
How old? How old?
I have a 7-year-old. Well, he'll be 7 in 2 weeks, so he's 7, basically. 7-year-old. And then I have a 3.5-year-old daughter too. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, 7-year-old. That's so David was 8. David was 8 at the time, so it was around that same age, etc. So I just want to, again, I gave him the option that if you don't play next year, but we're not going to quit just because the game changed in this particular case. And again, I didn't like it, to be honest with you. I thought it was a little harsh, but again, those are the rules. And I also wanted to show him. I also wanted to teach him consequences. Our consequences have actions, and he learned that lesson. And today, he's a vice president with New York Life Insurance, and he's doing very, very well, etc. So we every now and then we get together and we talk about that day.
Well,
today is a fond memory.
We had a similar conversation because initially he didn't want to play in the games and all these things. And I said, well, you know what? You said you wanted to do it. We signed you up. Even if you don't play, you will sit on the sidelines and you will be with your team because you said you wanted to play and you can't let your team down at the end of the day. But since then, he's wanted to come back. There's days that are challenging, for his soccer team, but I think he started understanding like it's a team effort, right? And if you're not contributing, you still need to be there for your team, But
and we need to teach
similar
these
conversation just reminded me a lot of that. So
So well, hey, you're doing a great job. All righty. Well, I need to pack up all my gear.
Thanks so much, Ed, for your help. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Kat.
Yes, my pleasure. And I will get the recording moved from Zoomland into our YouTube channel, and I will send that link and we'll put it out on LinkedIn and hopefully drive some more traffic to you guys.
Awesome.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.
Say again.
I just said have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
All right.